Start, and thank you very much for joining this meeting. We would like to welcome you very much at this workshop that has been co-organized by the FAIRsFAIR project, the SSHOC project, and also the EOSC-Nordic project. And the area of focus for this workshop today is how we might or want to progress towards a network of European FAIR enabling trustworthy digital repositories. You will hear me and others probably use at some point the TDR abbreviation, but then this means Trustworthy Digital Repository. Thank you, Sarah, for progressing the slides and also for starting the recording. What we would like to do with you today, with this quite big of a group, actually, thanks for joining again. What we would like to do is explore ideas and needs of such a proposed trustworthy digital repository network. Because at this stage, there is not one such thing as a European network of TDRs. And we would like to test the waters and discuss with you what are the needs for such a network and the possible goals and things like that. The proposed outcome of today, that would be great if we could end up with that, is that we have together identified steps on how to progress towards such a network. Let me just say the trigger for this workshop really, it came from the 3 projects I just mentioned, because all of these 3 projects have been running repository support activities for repositories that are seeking to achieve a TDR status. And we're all looking to sustain our efforts and to foster our initial engagement. So this is why we organized this workshop. Next slide. We have assembled for you a program in 3 parts. So we'll start off with some introductions by various perspectives on such a network. We have the European Commission represented. We're very glad to have you on board as well. We will have the EOSC task force and Ingrid Dillo as well from DANS. Then we will progress with very briefly an overview of repository support approaches. And we will close off with the lion's share of the meeting, I would say, where we would like to discuss with you how we can progress towards such a network. Next slide. Yeah, so this is actually also a call for all of you to please use your microphone if you're not speaking. For E and D, there is a yes, thank you so much. Makes it a little bit easier to talk. So, however, if you want to really engage in discussions, you're always free to ask questions via microphone or chat. We have also built in some Q&A moments. If you have any questions during the presentations, please put them in the chat, but also don't feel shy to unmute your microphone at later stages. We didn't have any registration form, so we would like, if you want, please to add your name, affiliation, and email address to the minutes. There is a short link here, and it will be also shared in the chat. So that would be very much appreciated. And last point, you have been aware and probably noted already that this workshop will be recorded. For those of, there were certain colleagues that couldn't make it, and we thought it would be a good idea to share this in a later stage, at least on the FAIRsFAIR website. Next slide. And with this, I'm done. I would like to give the floor to Ingrid Dillo, Deputy Director at DANS, for her to shed light on this idea. Please, Ingrid, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ilona, and welcome everybody. As a kickoff for today's meeting, today's workshop, I would like to say a few words about the background of this initiative and also about the role of the repositories in supporting the EOSC. The capacity of these repositories is, I think, a key condition also to the success of EOSC. And for this, the repositories, of course, need to demonstrate that they meet trustworthiness standards and also that they have the capability to support fair data management. Now, we believe that repositories will make a greater contribution, I think, to EOSC if they can coordinate their efforts. And I think that is also something that is clear from the FAIRsFAIR project context. And that is why we are advocating and exploring this idea of a European network. Now, this network is doesn't have to be built from scratch, and it could take advantage of many existing community efforts. And one of them, of course, is CoreTrustSeal certification, but there are also other standards, as you can see here on this slide. Next. If you look at the current state of affairs around CoreTrustSeal certification, you can see on this map that we have around 70 repositories that are certified across disciplines and across countries in Europe. We also have a number of Nestor certified repositories. Unfortunately, we don't have any ISO standard certified repositories, but all in all, we already have a sizable network. Next slide. Now, we can, of course, also build on existing coordination networks that are there for digital repositories. There are networks already in disciplinary contexts like CLARIN and SSHOC and CESDA. And we also have regional and national networks that could be harnessed, like EOSC-Nordic, where we hear more about later on in this workshop. We have Research Data Netherlands, and for example, also in France, there is a repository program as part of the National Open Science Policy. Next slide. Next to that, the network could also make use of current efforts to provide technology solutions that support digital preservation and that also help to create the technical connection between data services within the EOSC and the repositories. Now, work in that area has been done already in the EOSC Hub project and is now happening, for example, within DICE and also the European Archiver project. Next slide. Such a European network of TDRs would bring, I think, several advantages to different stakeholders. It has potential value not only for repositories, but also for researchers and for the EOSC itself. So if you look at the repositories, I think the advantage would be that the network would be a possibility to promote amongst the repositories the adoption of fair and trust practices, for example, through training and support programs like we have seen within several European projects. And I also think that it's very important that we unify the voice of the repositories within Europe and strengthen that voice through that unification, because the repositories really are a key stakeholder to EOSC. For the researchers, it could facilitate better access to long-term preservation services if we are able to create really the connections between the repositories on the one hand and the data services and technology providers within EOSC on the other. And finally, I think for EOSC itself, it would help to increase repository compliance with the rules of participation in EOSC. And it would, of course, also help to implement fair and trust assessment frameworks. So next slide. All in all, I think that such a network would really help to maintain the fairness level of European data over time. And in that way also ultimately increase, hopefully, the reuse of data. Next slide. And I also think that at this point in time, the winds are favorable to create such an initiative. So for example, if you look at the EOSC Association, already in the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, the point of the importance of long-term preservation has been pressed. And also at the moment, the Commission is preparing their work program 2023-24. And from the EOSC Association, a number of draft priorities have been pointed out. And among them, you see several that relate to this topic, the long-term access to and preservation of data, but also the quality of research repositories. Next slide. And we also now have within the EOSC Association a task force that is specifically geared towards long-term data preservation, that is going to dive into this topic and come up with recommendations also in this area around a possible network, and also the linkage of this network to services within EOSC. So next slide. I really think that the winds are favorable, and if we want to set up such a network and we want to proceed this initiative, really now is the time. And here I'd like to stop and hand over again to Ilona.
Thank you, Ingrid, so much for shedding your light on this. I suggest we have 2 more speakers with these kind of brief 5-minute presentations to save your questions, if any, for after those. So now I would like to introduce Christian Cucinello, affiliated to the European Commission, Directorate General Research and Innovation. So I would like to invite you, Christian, to please share with us your ideas on a possible TDR network.
Thanks a lot. And I'm Christian Cucinello, Policy Officer at the Open Science Unit in the Directorate General of Research and Innovation of the European Commission. So first of all, let me thank the organizers of the workshop that comes very timely and in line with the developments of the European Open Science Cloud. So next, please. So, as most of you know, the European Commission is promoting the implementation of an open science policy that aims at making open science the norm, and its practices the standards of conducting publicly funded research. To do so, many challenges have to be tackled, from the provisions of services to enable the fair data principles to the recognition of open science practices in the careers of researchers. Enablers such as EOSC are fundamental to support such transition. Next, please. So the EC supports the operationalization of open science through its Horizon Europe funding program. And more specifically, within the widening participation and strengthening the European Research Area work program, shortly WIDERA, and with the Research Infrastructure work program, specifically with the Infra-EOSC destination. Moreover, the open science provisions are across the entire funding program and are also subject of dedicated services that the EC offers to Horizon Europe beneficiaries, such as the program-wide open access publishing platform. I think you heard about it. It's called Open Research Europe. Next, please. So the attention to depositing in trusted repositories is high, both for what concerns open access requirements and the open and fair data requirements. We can skip, honestly, this list of provisions and requirements, so you can also move to the next. The only thing that I want to mention is the deposition in a trusted repository that is part of such conditions concerning publications. And if you could move to the next. As I already said, as well on open and fair data requirements, depositing in data in a trusted repository is one of the key elements to ensure the stability and the accessibility of the data produced within the funding of Horizon Europe. Next, please. As I already said, within this condition, we use the word trusted. Okay, here we do not need to debate of between trustworthy and trusted. Just we need to look at the specifics. So as you can see from the list, such definition is very much aligned with what will be the discussion in this workshop as trustworthy digital repository. And this is the key element, and the need to ensure that we are looking at the same things and towards the same direction. Next, please. So Ingrid already mentioned that the EC is in the process of defining the new research infrastructure work program, and we are listening to the input of the EOSC partnership and its task forces. And the aim is also to contribute to the EOSC strategic research and innovation agenda implementation. So as you can see, highlighted in yellow, a network of trusted repositories federated within EOSC, the support to improve the quality of data with standard practices and services are all, and also the fostering of the inclusion of long-term access and preservation of preservation infrastructures are elements and are within the EOSC, of course, them within the EOSC federated environment are among the preliminary objectives that stand up in the making of the work program. So it's why in the beginning I said that this workshop is very timely. So next, please. To conclude, as I mentioned in the beginning, relating to the service that the Commission offers for open access. Beyond that, the EC also intends to offer a multidisciplinary repository that will enrich the EOSC itself and also, and most likely, be part of the network of trustworthy repository. With this, I want just to highlight that I really see that this network of trustworthy repository that we will discuss today is of paramount importance to make EOSC the key enabler for open science. And with this, I just leave the floor to the next speaker, and I thank again for the organization of this workshop.
Thank you, Christian. Many thanks for sharing your views. Let's progress to the third speaker of today. This is Hervé Loers. He's Repository and Preservation Manager at the UK Data Archive and representing here the EOSC Task Force Long-Term Digital Preservation. Please go ahead, Hervé.
Thanks, Ilona, and hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Hervé Loers. Through the UK Data Service, I am the representative for CESDA on the task forces alongside my co-chair, Roxanne Vins. Next, please. So yeah, overall, the EOSC has set up a number of advisory groups and task forces. They kind of did a community consultation on a series of topics. This has led to 5 advisory groups broken up into 13 task forces. And the idea here is to inform the association and others to help steer the implementation of the EOSC. Identifying strategic gaps is particularly important, and identifying areas of investment for the SRIA. Liaising with EOSC projects and offering feedback and advice is an important element too, because this is very much a two-way process. Next, please. The task forces are broken up into a number of advisory group headings: implementation of EOSC, technical challenges on EOSC, metadata and data quality, research careers and curricula, and long-term data preservation sits alongside defining funding models for EOSC under sustaining EOSC with a slightly longer-term view. Next, please. And each of these task forces is supported by a number of liaisons. We're lucky to have Bob Jones from CERN supporting us on the Sustaining EOSC task force. Next. The first thing that we were asked to do, very close to the beginning of this process when it was first begun sort of later last year, was to provide some initial input to the Horizon Europe work programme. The 2 major topics we provided initial feedback from on the group were quality of research repositories, where they were looking for feedback alongside infrastructure for quality software, another one of the task forces, and long-term access to and preservation of data, alongside the architecture, PID policy and implementation task forces. And we also provided feedback on a number of the other areas here, and I'm going to go through the overall work that we're looking at in the task force. A subset of this is specific to the network, but I think you'll see that all of them are relevant to the network. So the other topics here include as well for the SHREA: quality of software, sensitive data, unstructured non-standard data, multilingualism, science clusters and the long tail, and quality of research data, which are all also major subjects for a repository network. You can see the current timeline for this work program at the moment. Next slide, please. We've initiated meetings, provided initial input. This has been summarized and shared with the Commission, and then there'll be a consultation on inputs to the work program in Q1, and hopefully a multi-annual roadmap from spring 2022. At that point, we'll be reactive to that process. Next slide, please. Oh, and the next. We've arranged our initial meetings and we're in the process of identifying chairs for everything. This is in the very early stages, so it lines up well with the event here today. We'll approve a charter with our full membership of the groups and be defining a comprehensive work plan. Next, please. I'll go over the subgroups very briefly after this, just with the keywords, but just to show you what we've got. A shared understanding of vision, financial aspects of long-term data preservation, the roles, responsibilities and accountability elements of long-term digital preservation, and finally that European network of trustworthy digital repositories, and for EOSC data services. I'll say more about that in a moment. Next slide, please. So for the shared understanding and vision, this group and its future would be a very important element of that. Context of the EOSC, mapping the landscape, strategies for preservation policies, connection, collaboration at the national, community and local level. Providing recommendations for sustainable implementation, policies and practices, and suggestions for strategy. Next, please. The financial aspects, simpler to say, but more complicated to deliver. The costs, the responsibilities, and the different stakeholders across possible different business models. Next, please. This roles, responsibilities, and accountability overall, mapping and promotion of these concepts, but also looking at the stakeholders across the data lifecycle, awareness raising, and implications for training. And the data management planning gets a special note there. And then finally, though quite clearly connected on the next slide, those recommendations for trustworthy digital repositories. You'll see here the particular EOSC focus, fair enabling principles, disciplinary and geographical spread, and then the mention of EOSC data services that need to connect to this network, which indicates the need for a wider range of data services. Next slide, please. So we'll be looking to engage across projects, wider community consultation, and we're looking for other initiatives to align with. Next, please. There'll be consensus within the task force, consultation with projects and communities, EOSC Association membership, and then we'll agree across the task forces and then propose to the board via our liaisons on the EOSC Association. We do have, next slide please, a draft roadmap in place, but I think I'll leave you with that last slide there with those recommendations for trustworthy digital repositories that we can all think of as we listen to the rest of the presentations today. Thank you.
Many thanks, Hervé, for sharing your views on the topic from the perspective of the EOSC task force. I see Mickey Lindler applauding, so thanks for this virtual engagement, Mickey. Much appreciated. So we have scheduled time for one burning question, and we happen to have a question in the chat. So I would like to invite the speakers of just now to shed light on the question by Paul Stokes, and he asks, how would a network of TDRs fundamentally differ from what currently exists? For example, Ingrid, is there anything you would like to say on this?
Yeah, sure. I completely understand the question, Paul. if I look at this from a very personal perspective, I have always found it a bit of a shame that we don't have one voice in Europe for the repositories. And then I'm thinking of an example like Liber, who is really the voice within Europe at the table for the university libraries. So I think that we have the potential, based on the support programs in different European projects, but also based on the fact that we have so many CoreTrustSeal and other certified repositories, to create a network. And a network, to my mind, could serve different purposes. And of course, you need to see what the appetite for this is. But I could imagine that we have a kind of a loose coalition, and we have the possibility of having representatives at certain tables to have a unified and stronger voice. And I also think that if we sit together, we can maybe also gather some funding and work on knowledge exchange and on support programs for aspiring repositories that will want to improve their capabilities in the area of FAIR and trustworthiness. And there is also the technical aspect. I don't think that the long-term preservation will be part of the EOS core. So what I see in my head is something like a network around that EOS core that is also technically connected to that core, so that we have automatic ingest functions, and researchers can ideally, with one push on a button, send data sets that they want to be kept for the long term to a repository in that network that is around the core. So that is, in short, I think, my first take at this.
Thank you, Ingrid. It was short, but still elaborate. So thank you for sharing the ideas on this one. Let's move on to the next slides, where we will have built into the program 3 5-minute overviews. So I would like to ask the speakers to stay within the 5 minutes, please, of the repository support approaches within first the FAIRsFAIR project presented by Linas Cepinskas, working with DANS. Then we'll have Henry Alalati. He is an information specialist at the Finnish Social Science Data Archive. That will be followed by Tuomas Alatera from FSD as well, and also connected to Tampere University. So first, I would like to invite Linas to step up.
Thank you, Ilona. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to present today on behalf of DANS and FAIRsFAIR. The title of the presentation is Towards Making a Repository More Trustworthy and Fair Enabling. And the goal of this presentation is, of course, as Ilona also mentioned, to highlight some of the lessons learned through the repository support program from FAIRsFAIR. Next slide, please. So what is FAIRsFAIR? Probably many of you have heard about it. It's a project funded by the European Commission with a goal to provide practical solutions for the use of FAIR principles throughout the entire cycle of research data lifecycle. Namely, we focus on research data management, procedures, standards, metrics, and related matters based on FAIR principles. The ultimate goal is to accelerate the European Open Science Cloud by opening up all the knowledge, sharing expertise, guideline, training, and tools on FAIR matters. The project started in 2019 and will be wrapped up in 2022, this year in March. There are 22 partners from 8 EU member states, and the coordinator of the project is DANS. Next slide, please. So this is the journey towards becoming trustworthy and fair enabling. There are 2 partners here, 2 stages involved. This is the research data repositories that are supported thanks to the FAIRsFAIR repository support program, and the certification program, which supports repositories for achieving CoreTrustSeal certification. The 10 European repositories that are part of this support program, they also play a very important role towards trust and FAIR. They contribute their invaluable knowledge, expertise on how trustworthy repository practices can best enable FAIR data. And the program itself provides in-depth support in seeking CoreTrustSeal certification. Next slide, please. The support program has a number of services and tools to equip repositories with different knowledge and solutions. So far, we have organized 5 support workshops addressing different themes and aspects that are difficult or act as obstacles towards trust and FAIR. There are also different practical tools developed, different worksheets, and different metrics to help support repositories. There have also been test reviews carried out by repositories participating in the program to prepare them for the actual CoreTrustSeal certification process. And there have been one-on-one support and advice sessions and interviews organized to facilitate this process. Next slide, please. The support team of the FAIRsFAIR repository certification program consists of 5 partners, which is DUNS in the Netherlands, UK Data Archive, United Kingdom, CINES in France, Digital Curation Center in the United Kingdom, and Pangea in Germany. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, there are 10 different repositories from across Europe that are part of this support program. They represent different scientific domains, different subject areas, and they contribute their invaluable knowledge to this support program. Next slide, please. This support program does not act in isolation from other initiatives and other projects. The program has been partnering with other similar repository support initiatives globally. Some of the examples are the American Geophysical Union, AGU community, as well as the Australian Research Data Commons, ARDC, and the Portage Network in Canada. The goal of these networking initiatives is to share experiences and lessons learned, explore the avenues for collaboration, and in this way to together identify good practices to enable trust and FAIR across trustworthy digital repositories. Next slide, please. Some key takeaways from our repository certification program are listed here in these bullet points. As I mentioned earlier, the support program represents great diversity in terms of geography, domains, and maturity of participating repositories. 9 out of 10 repositories have already submitted their applications to CoreTrustSeal, which shows their trust in the program and their commitment to achieve the certification status. Repositories have preferred one-on-one support as well as a hybrid approach in the facilitation. For future programs, we recommend taking into account the starting point of each repository, making sure that their needs are catered to. Also, initiatives should take note of CoreTrustSeal aspects that are found most difficult and provide more tools and support to address them. And last but not least, the support programs should mimic the actual certification processes as closely as possible, so as to help repositories to prepare them best for application. And next slide, please. And here are some recommendations from our earlier report, which again concludes some of the aspects that are important to take into account when setting up a similar support program in the future for repositories aiming at achieving trustworthy repository status. Thank you.
Many thanks, Elias. With this, let's progress directly to the next speaker, which is Henry. Welcome, Henry. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. So my name is Henry Alalahti, and I'm a member of SSHOC Task 8.2 as a representative of FSD and SESTA. And I'll give you a brief overview of our certification support, which is quite similar actually to what we saw before. Next slide, please. Yes, here's some basic information about the SSHOC project. I won't go into very much detail of this, as many of you are probably already familiar with it. You can see that we are at the final stretch because our project is ending in April. And one of the main goals is maximizing reuse through open science and FAIR principles, which is where certification and trust comes into play. Next slide, please. So the main purpose of Task 8.2 is to bolster and improve trust and quality of the SSHOC repositories through support. And in practice, this mainly means providing support in applying for the CoreTrustSeal and drafting related self-assessments. And here you can see that we have a strong representation from many of the SHOC infrastructures in our team. Next slide, please. And in our first deliverable called Certification Plan for SHOC Repositories, we identified 49 repositories that were where our support activities should focus on. But for support recipients, you can see on this slide, they were selected through an open call in the summer of 2020, because obviously 49 repositories would be quite a lot to work with. So these were the ones that we focused on and provided our main support. So 14, oh, sorry, can you go back? Yeah, so 14 support repositories from 13 different countries, from various domains, and have different data types and challenges. And it should be noted that not all of them had a formal certification as their goal, because they wanted to maybe just initiate the process and improve their practices and see what the process is like, and maybe apply for the certificate later. Next, please. So the main support activity for us was one-on-one meetings with the repositories, where they were able to ask questions about the application and gain insights into what is expected in the CoreTrustSeal certification. And our task members also commented and gave feedback on the repository's self-assessments. In addition, we organized 3 online events related to trust and certification, and created a SHOC webpage for certification with FAQs and other resources, helping repositories that are seeking certification. Next slide, please. And the key takeaways for us, quite similar to what Linus mentioned. Our support process is still ongoing, so these are preliminary findings, but we can say that the process has allowed the repositories to familiarize themselves with the certification process and gain understanding of what it actually entails and what is expected of them. And it has also allowed them to consider their data management and other practices and enhance their documentation. And we've already received some feedback on the certification and noted which requirements in the CTS are challenging maybe, or cause some problems for some repositories. So, and we will ask repositories for more feedback at the end of the process too, and we'll deliver this to the certification board. At the moment, we have 5 repositories that have sent or are about to send their CTS application out of 8 repositories that had the actual formal certification as their explicit goal. This could change since we have still some time left in the project and we are still continuing the support. We also noticed, as Linus pointed out, that the repositories vary a lot in terms of their type, domain, and maturity. So there really isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to the support, and you really need to take the specifics of each repository into account. Another finding was that the repositories differ in terms of resources, and for some smaller repositories, the time and money needed for certification may be an obstacle, even if they have strong interest in applying. And finally, in discussions with some of the repositories, especially newer ones, we found that many of them would benefit from closer cooperation or even a peer-to-peer network with other repositories, not only in terms of certification, but going beyond it and improving other practices and even the technical aspects of the incipient repositories. So that's the main takeaways from us. Next slide, please. And yeah, here is our first deliverable and the website I mentioned earlier, and our final deliverable is currently being drafted and will be published around March. And
thank you, Henry. Many
that's
thanks
it for me. Thanks
for preparing, and really nice to see that the key takeaways in some way are also similar, that there is an increased need for community support, peer-to-peer community support. So perhaps the network that's at hand at this workshop can benefit to that. Thank you so much. I would like to invite Tuomas, please. representing the EOSC-Nordic support activities.
Thank you. Hello all. Tuomas Alatera from the Finnish Social Science Data Archive. We seem to be a driving force in in this certification support at the moment. Though I'll have to mention that there are many others in both in SSHOC and EOSC-Nordic as well. So I could sort of immediately wrap up that it is more or less the same than the previous two in this one. The projects have happened at the same time and they have shared a number of characteristics. So EOSC-Nordic is the one that has most months left at the moment, but you'll have to factor in that there is the summer 22 included, so not so much will happen during the last 2 months, I would say. But here you can see where they happened. Unlike SSHOC, for example, we are regional implementation project, so it's Nordic countries and the Baltics that are included. Very hands-on approach to both FAIR and certification, and also cross-disciplinary. So it's not only social sciences, but all the fields of science. Work package 4, the goal is on FAIR data and certification support. Next slide, please. And if if you narrow down the goal of the work package 4, it's about FAIR digital objects in trustworthy digital repositories. And this division leads to the support types we have had available on the FAIR side of things, and this obviously sort of tells it's a separation between SSHOC effort and EOSC-Nordic effort is that we work on FAIR as much as on CoreTrustSeal, for example. So on that side we're doing automatic FAIR evaluation and verification support, and also identifying incentives for FAIR uptake in the Nordic and Baltic region. So in a digital trustworthy digital repositories side of things, there is the CoreTrustSeal support and repository-specific guidance for certification, and also FAIR certification feedback, for example, to FAIRsFAIR and CTS. Next slide, please. So there's a quick support timeline. I won't go into details there, but what we have done there was to initially identified almost 100 evaluation support candidates, and the automated FAIR evaluation of these, there's a typo there. I mean that continues until the end of the project. So we hope to see some results of the project in that evaluation as well. But based on invitation and interest, we've selected 13 repositories, which I mentioned there, as support recipients. Some of them have received or we were able to provide them at this stage, and the rest of them are still in the process at the moment. We are looking for 2 of them submitting CoreTrustSeal applications fairly soon, and others are expected to do so in the spring. Next one, please. The support modes have been very similar to the ones you have already heard. So we have had very conversational webinars, always reserving lots of time for discussion and not only presentations. And then we have had verification steps webinar series, and there's one coming up fairly soon, verification step number 5. Want more information on the website. And with this sort of one-to-one support, we have always done the goal setting for each repository, because in this project, the goal could have been not only to, not to even send or even do the CoreTrustSeal application or self-assessment. It could have been just a verification of your repository. So the goals for each repository, they are different. We have had these regular and theme support meetings with dedicated work package 4 experts and repository representatives. So it's been kind of one-to-one support with, let's say, from 2 to 8 people on the call. And then, of course, we provide feedback on all these assessments in between of those meetings. Yes, go on to the next one, please. So key takeaways with 8 months to go, as mentioned. So one of the challenges is that support of both verification and certification at the same time is not always simple or not even mutually productive. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It depends on where the strengths are, both with the network experts and where the interest of the repository is. And they might not go hand in hand all the time. So there's plenty of sort of a knowledge base and technology dependence that affects here. So interest often exceeds resources available, means that repositories might not have the time or the money they really need to do, carry out the self-assessment on time. So here I see that we definitely need support of the more informal infrastructures and countries in where you could go and ask for information. We cannot always have a project that supports certification. We have seen notable progress in documentation, cooperation, and in general just understanding the concepts of certification via these self-assessment and support calls. The good thing is that CoreTrustSeal and FAIR, they seem to be applicable to various disciplines, and it's definitely easy to see this and easy to implement when networking with various actors, not just, let's say, social science archives, but you have other CTS certified actors as well. And one of the outcomes is that what is a repository is still a bit of a mystery, because when you're trying to apply FAIR or CoreTrustSeal requirements to an entity that actually isn't a repository in the sense that we expect them to be, that's when the things come a bit more complicated. And I think I only have like additional links left in my next slides. So those are the ones we have produced at the moment. You'll find some information there, and obviously the final deliverable is still to come.
Thank you.
And that's me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for representing the EOSC-Nordic activities. And also thank you for the whole audience. We've been following also the discussions in the chat. And yeah, so there is one topic I think that comes back all the time, at least in the chat. We could have 2 minutes to briefly talk about that before we move into the Mentimeter discussion. And this is that there were many interesting ideas about a possible multidisciplinary cloud-based repository that was introduced by Christian, by Christian Cucinello. So Christian, is there anything you would like to wrap up on this? I see you've also already answered in the chat, but do you want to share anything plenary here?
Yes, I see that the repository has, let's say, attract a lot of attention. Yeah, what we intend to do is very similar to what Zenodo currently does, and of course, we want a much more integrated approach, and let's say there are some aspects that will come in the making of that will be cleared in the making of this repository. But all the points that you raised are relevant. Some of those I replied. I think I was replying to the last comment on the preservation and changes of formats and other issues that might arise from let's say depositing for a certain number of years. And yes, what we intend is also to enable this repository with expert curation capacity, and in the way of let's say catalyzing the help and the attention of experts to overcome such issues that are related to data quality, but also related to preservation. And yes, there will not be a perfect repository. I don't think that a perfect repository exists to satisfy the needs of all the disciplines, and we rely on existing repositories that are domain specific and already ready to serve the community, and we hope that those repositories will be federated within EOSC and will be part of the network. Yeah. So we don't want to replace any existing repository. We just want to offer a service that could complement and make easier the life of our researchers.
Thank you. And this noise was by me. So thank you for your view on that. And now I think there is a time I would like to ask Sarah to progress the slides to already the Mentimeter code, please, because I'm very curious to hear the thoughts of the other group as well. We can skip this slide, Sarah. Thank you so much. And we would like to invite you to move to menti.com, take, for example, a separate telephone or however you would like to do it. You could go to menti.com and please enter then the code 3208-0926. It's already in the chat, as I see. And then it will be Maaike who will be sharing her screen. So Sarah, if you could unshare, then we could prepare the Mentimeter to gather your views commonly. Thank you for this one. This is a very straightforward one. Well, actually, which of these options best describe your background? If you have multiple hats, we all have, but please choose then your best described background. And as you can see here, we have invited quite a lot of different stakeholders. I mean, not only the co-organizing projects, of course, but also we have invited European certified repositories. And like, you know, also the CoreTrustSeal we invited, but also the Nestor working group. So they're both under the label of certified repositories. We have 83 attendants in total. Let's give a little bit more time for others. Some still coming in. Yeah, almost all are present. So thank you very much for sharing this with us. This brings us to the second question. Oh, still some coming in. Yeah, so we thought of which stakeholders might be interesting, but do you have any other ideas of who should or must be involved in such a potential setup of the network? And this is an open answer question. In your perspective, which other stakeholders should be involved? Thank you so much for answers coming in. I see a couple of RDAs coming in, some other disciplinary specific approaches, like, for example, Clarin. Can you move the screen down a little bit, Maaike, so we can see the others as well? Funders as well. Yeah, I see also there an interesting one, wider data services across the research data lifecycle. If you go a little bit up, there on the right, you see somebody's mentioning wider data services. And this is also an interesting topic that we have been thinking about in the FAIRsFAIR project. Today, we're focusing on repositories as being a service, but of course, there are also other services in the research data lifecycle that might have a need to be trustworthy. So I can understand this answer coming in. Thank you for that. "73 answers." We really appreciate the effort you take to provide your answers here. Thank you so much. For the next question, please, Maaike. It's actually a two-part question. The first one is, would you want a European trustworthy digital repository network to come into existence? Majority saying yes. Of course, then I will be quite interested to hear some view on one of you that said not sure yet, which is of course perfectly fine. Is there anybody willing to share the choice for not sure yet? What might be the reasons? What are your considerations? You can just unmute your microphone if you want.
Well, maybe, Ilona, I think it would be, I can imagine that people think we're not sure because, you know, we first need to establish the kind of shared vision of what this network would be and what the goals of such a network would be. So I'm already very happy to see that a lot of people say yes, but I think that that is a question that comes first more.
Yeah, so that is also true, very much true. And this is also the next question that's connected to this. So please, Maaike, if you could progress to the next one. This is one where we might have a little bit of discussion and take a little bit more time to discuss in this workshop. So in your opinion, what should be the possible goals of such a network, or what could be the possible? I'll give you some time to think about it. Thank you for your answers coming in. Is there a participant, a colleague who would like to highlight his or her possible goal for a network?
Yeah, this is Bert here, if I can say something.
Sure, please go ahead.
My name is Bert Meerman from the GoFair Foundation. I think it's very important that we, when we think of a network, that we keep the data as much as possible decentralized and federated. I don't think it's a good idea, for instance, to throw everything into one big data warehouse. I think it's much smarter to have a distributed infrastructure across Europe, but what you need to create then is an infrastructure that can tap in all these different decentralized federated data sources. I think that would be the best possible way of doing it.
Thank you, Bert. And my follow-up question would be if you then would connect it to the EOSC, for example, because this is our initial focus today is on Europe and EOSC. How would that come together in your view?
Well, that would link very nicely with the EOSC, because also in the EOSC there are some clear ideas and clear statements in terms of organizing a federated, decentralized infrastructure for the research environment as a whole in Europe. So we've seen a number of projects where organizations are trying to put all the data into one data warehouse, not very successful. We now see more and more projects where the data stay at the source, under the control of the data owners, and where you create a kind of layer on top of that to either visit that data or share that data. And it very clearly looks like that is the future. We will see more and more of those type of projects, either within the EOSC or linked to the EOSC, or in other areas.
Thank you, Bert. Any views to respond to that from the audience?
Well, that's good. It looked like everybody is in full agreement then.
Silence is approval, you mean? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, of course, I hoped we would have been in one room together and it would have been a lot easier.
I know.
But I think Ingrid opened her microphone.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much because I would be interested in hearing other people's opinions. But I think that what Bert is saying is exactly what would be in my mind, at least, and what we're also working on in a sense. For example, in the DICE project, where we are creating links between services within EOSC and repositories. So the idea would be that you have that technical linkage, but that it's in a federated way and not bringing all the data together, of course.
Yeah,
so that aligns.
Yeah. And I know you think about it like that, but it's still good to confirm it every now and then with a lot of people.
No, you're right. Yeah.
Maybe if I could add some, not that I want to contradict Bert, because I'm also in favor of federation, but I just wanted to highlight that there are cases, and we've seen this in working with COVID-19 related data, where having centralized data may be easier for analysis that you may want to do, and how fast you can do that. And that there are some cases, like, for example, in certain clinical trials where the data are already centralized, even though the clinical trials may be happening in different parts, let's say, of the world, or in different institutes, then someone aggregates this data. So then obviously there it wouldn't make sense to refederate, So yeah, I would say yes, a big yes, but with some exceptions where it would make sense to have centralized data.
Absolutely, Christian. And we are definitely not saying that centralization is bad, but it is important that, try to do it as federated as possible. And we've also seen projects where part of the data is then centrally stored for some reason, also sometimes for a short while. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as the goal is to try to keep the data under the control of the data owner, then, things work out nicely.
Thank you for this discussion. What I've also noticed that many people wrote things about best practices, developing commonly standards and things like that. And that's all quite targeted towards repositories, of course, and they would really benefit, I think, from such a possible network. I also wonder if there are any views on how a possible trustworthy network of repositories might be beneficial to researchers. Can we make already at this very initial stage a link to how the researchers behind all the repositories and infrastructures would benefit from this? Who would like to share his or her view on that?
Hi, Ilona. survey from the Long-Term Digital Preservation Task Force. I think one of the things that's come up, and I've been involved with FAIRsFAIR as well, has been the huge challenges of working on the interoperability and the reuse side of FAIR, and some of the more internally focused requirements of things like the CoreTrustSeal that focus very clearly on the organizational side and on measures taken to kind of offer services. But I think there's an overall feeling that we all need to do more to identify the researcher needs for reuse. And I think that helps inform interoperability as well, if we understand those relationships between researchers while they're actually working. So while I think we're in a very good place from FAIR moving forward and CoreTrustSeal moving forward in terms of an integrated life cycle and that kind of thing, I think there really is room for better communications with those researchers and putting the concepts of reuse first and then mapping those back to the practices of repositories and of other data services.
Yeah, thank you for that addition. Maggie, you have your hand raised.
Yes, so thanks for a very good workshop and very good input across things. When it comes to researchers, I think they have different types of needs, right, vis-a-vis repositories. First of all, there is the issue of where a researcher should be depositing their research data. In some disciplines, it's very clear because there are community repositories that are well recognized already, and then people tend to use that. But in other cases, especially maybe for more narrow fields, it can be quite a challenge to find a relevant and good repository, even if there are services like re3data.org that can help. But people are in some cases sort of left to their own devices, and maybe that can sometimes lead to bad choices because they are uploading their data to either the wrong discipline or to a repository which has a very low amount of resources to really do good curation. That's one issue. Then the other thing is, of course, finding data when researchers need data for their research that others have been producing. And then they are also sometimes in the same situation, and people tend to resort to Googling or something like that unless they really have a clear lead to follow. So any alliance of repositories, and especially trusted ones, that can help to provide some guidances, maybe even work with something like re3data.org to signpost the way that people should start thinking about these things, that people have the right type of process, I think could be a great help. Just one more comment to that is that, of course, most researchers, when it comes to individual researchers or smaller researcher groups, they have no clue today really what the European Open Science Cloud is and what it can do for them. And so that's one thing. Also, that maybe we need to take a more comprehensive approach to how we inform and how we reach out to researchers with information in general. It's something that we need to think about, so that we're not talking at a high level, but not addressing the concerns and
Stepping really into them
that they need.
Yeah. Okay, so I thank you, Maggie. I think this is a really clear plea also for better visibility and findability of repositories. So that might also be something that we could foster in such a network. I agree with that. I'll have a look at the time. We have 20 minutes left. Before I go to the next question, I will have Tuomas to open your microphone, please. I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, my vision here. I'll just add one quick point is that what we have noticed in EOSC-Nordic and in, well, I guess in SSHOC as well, is that all repositories basically are in some level dependent on the platform they run, and also if the platform providers are not part of the network, then there's a danger that there is a gap that we come up with requirements that the repositories should be doing without realizing that they actually cannot do it with the platform of their choice. And obviously, it's not a viable solution that they keep changing or programming or try to do all kinds of different changes to each instance of the repository platform. So we need to have some kind of a sort of a lively discussion with those providers and as well. So I would say, would also argue that one voice would be more efficient than each repository, just sort of putting additional notes to the wish list for the future changes.
Yeah, thank you for this clear addition that also taps into the wider services needs that some of you mentioned in your answers. Thank you, Thomas. Next slide, please, Mike. Next question. Like I said, we have 3 left. So I'm not, I mean, we won't get it done and dusted today, the possible goals of the network. But having this in mind, what we've just talked about, what do you think are the biggest challenges to progress towards such a network? Money and time are mentioned. Also, the common vision that Ingrid already stressed, that this should be the first step that we could get like a shared understanding of what we're talking about. Many of you seem to find that. I'll give you a little bit more time. One thing I see coming, recurring all the time is also how to understand the difference in disciplines. Is there somebody who'd like to tell a little bit more about why he or she noted that as one of the biggest challenges? Any views on that? So the difference between disciplines and how we can have a shared understanding among the disciplines.
I wasn't one of the one who put that answer in, but I absolutely agree with it as a tension. This is coming actually from the Digital Creation Centre and the FAIRsFAIR project. I mean, I think it perhaps, you know, one good illustration, what in answer to one of the earlier questions, somebody mentioned the issue of repositories in the galleries, libraries, archives and museums world, where they are often carrying out similar functions. I think they, depending on the purposes we're talking about, they certainly ought to be part of any network we're talking about, but they operate in very different ways with very different workflows, I think, from many of the domain-specific repositories we're talking about, or indeed institutional repositories or general repositories like Zenodo. So I think that's not just disciplinary differences within the research community, but you know, an even broader difference as to, you know, who is running my repository, how is it getting funded, how is it being used, as well as what type of content does it have, and what type of knowledge do its users have as well.
Thank you for this exemplar, Kevin. Makes it clear, I think. Thank you so much. I don't see any new answers coming in, so let's progress to the next question. So the question here is, what other repository community efforts are you familiar with? And this is also related to the question of who do you think should be involved in the setup of a network? Are there any best practices or good examples that we all should definitely think about when thinking about this network. Thank you for your answers so far. I see a couple of times mentioned COAR. So this is indeed also, of course, an initiative that is on our list. That means that we've had a look at it. And of course, this with a community network activities they roll out. This is really one of the next few things we have to get into contact with. By design, this workshop, we have tailored it with this group. But I see a lot of useful additions, possible additions to the repository community effort group. Is there any specific repository community effort that one would like to highlight? Looking at the chats. Nope. That's okay. Thank you for sharing your views. I think the last question is also a very important one. So let's move to the last. So we'll still have some time to discuss. After today, I would say, what might be a next logical step to take? Because this is not really something that we have laid out in a roadmap with milestones and things like that. What can we do best to progress towards a possible network? Lunch, nice. Shout from the rooftops. I wonder, Ingrid, if you see these answers coming in, is there something that resonates, yeah, with your idea on what could be a next logical step to take?
I see many interesting suggestions coming in. I think the first logical step would be for us in the FAIRsFAIR context, also in the other projects, to digest what we have heard today and and also, of course, the outcomes of the Mentimeter. I think a next step after that would be to get back to the people that we have in this session with a couple of suggestions and ideas. I see the suggestion of I see the worry of what will happen after FAIRsFAIR is finished. Of course, the project stops on the 1st of March. But I think that we shouldn't really make this initiative, this idea, dependent on projects. My idea would be to have something more structural, not depending on projects. Of course, it would be great if also in the coming projects there would be funding available to set up, support and training programs. It would be very nice to have some funding for elements like this. But I think it would be also good to think about, to come to a kind of position paper, maybe to describe what the network could look like, what the different goals of such a network could be. And that we have another discussion with interested people in Europe to talk that through. and see if we can take it from there. Now we can digest all of that and do that within the context of the organizers of this workshop, but I would also like to extend the invitation and see whether there are any people amongst the audience who would be interested in working along with us to prepare such a take-off position paper on the basis of the outcomes of today, and then we can go back to the broader community and see whether this creates an appetite and whether it could fly. So that would be my first thoughts on this.
Yeah, that aligns also with what I see from the audience, to get first a shared vision with a small group, work on it, and of course, open it up to a wider audience. Yes. Anybody from the audience, is there a specific next logical step you would like to share with us? A particularly good idea? No, I don't hear any coming in. But I mean, we've gathered a lot of your views via multiple ways already today. So I would like to thank you very much for your engagement also in the Mentimeter discussion. Let's wrap up the Mentimeter discussion and give the floor to Ingrid for the last 5 or 10 minutes for a final wrap up of this workshop. So if Maaike could stop sharing, Sarah could take it over again.
Thanks, Ilona. And I'm not going to take another 10 minutes. I would just like to say thank you very much to all of our speakers, and also to Ilona as chair, and Sarah, who is behind the scenes as the host of this meeting. And also many thanks, of course, to everybody who is here for all of your active participation in the workshop. The fact that we had an audience of over 80 people, which was more than we expected, really tells me that long-term preservation and repositories are seen as a very important topic. I think we look forward to seeing the developments in the environment of the repositories in the coming months, around the EOSC task force, the new infra-EOSC projects that are starting up hopefully around spring, and also the new work program of the committee, of course, the European Commission. And again, with respect to the next steps around this initiative of a network of TDRs, I think we go back to do our homework, digest the results of the Mentimeter and all of your valuable comments of this morning. And then we will get back to you with suggestions on how we could move this forward. Again, the recordings of this workshop will be published, I think, on the FAIRsFAIR website. And in the meantime, if you have any further ideas, or you think you would like to think along with us, please reach out to us, and it would be great to have some more people to really think about what this network could look like and what good it could bring. So with that, I would like to end and thank you again all very much, and have a good day. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.